Let's take a look at the social and government environment. For the past 60 years, social and political struggles have taken new forms in the United States, imposing continuous pressures on our values and our institutions. Rising global tensions and value conflicts stem from our resolve to pursue objectives such as political freedom and social diversity while maintaining economic freedom and independence. Social relations are directly affected by political interests and global economic competition. There is much more to the social and governmental environment, however, than simply promoting economic freedom and social diversity. Recent turbulence surrounding public administration has resulted from a host of changes, paradoxes, and conflicts. Chief among them is rapid social change, not only in population growth, immigration patterns, but also in rapidly changing governmental roles and a multitude of technological innovation. Our capacity for economic growth is seriously hampered by a weaker US dollar and dependence on imported goods and raw materials, chiefly petroleum, but also limits resulting from the depletion of our natural resources. This weakens our balance of trade with other nations and results in income and job losses from our own products and services being less competitive on world markets. Another factor affecting our economic viability is the knowledge explosion, including the spread of technology, which carries with it increasing potential for very different kinds of human interaction. Growth of knowledge, science, and technological change are closely linked with changes in society and human capabilities, values, and behavior. The present unstable social and political environment in the United States threatens long-standing safety nets for many millions of low-income, disadvantaged, unemployed, physically challenged, and elderly Americans. There's an imbalance between public and private sectors in dealing with society's deeply rooted social problems. The public, governmental side of the scale still carries most of the overall responsibility, but this may not always be the case. Public administration is affected by a series of other paradoxical developments, some within this country alone and others worldwide. For one, there's been a blurring of distinctions between public and private sectors in the United States, contrary to the popular belief that they are separate and distinct. We're also experiencing a pervasive global revolution of rising expectations, which still dominates politics in developing nations and many portions of our own population. Another paradox exists between continuing emphasis on industrialization and the emergence of what has been called the post-industrial society. Post-industrialism refers to a socioeconomic order with a decline in the importance of production, land, and labor as economic forces, and a relative upsurge in the importance of information, new technology, and available leisure time. Implications for government and public administration are immense. Changes in revenue patterns, educational and service needs, information technologies and capabilities, political demands, and so on. Globalization is an acceleration of transactional flows of capital, ideas, culture, and goods and services across national boundaries via the internet. Globalization has eroded the importance of national sovereignty and increased the influence of overlapping networks of integrated technology and the power of multinational corporations. Post-national cynicism towards patriotism and political symbols such as anthems and flags and growing alienation from government institutions all mark this decline. At the same time, economic globalization requires that governments develop policies that address various disaffected groups, such as outsourced factory workers and developed nations, and those who are being displaced by the new economic order. The values of limited government and deregulation of private activity continue to exert a firm hold on our thinking in this country, yet many political agendas, government programs, and regulatory activities seem to conflict with it. The need for greater domestic security in order to prevent future terrorist attacks, as well as a further government regulation to protect customers and consumers, are prime examples. The extent to which we look to government to protect us from corporate fraud, natural disasters, and medical malpractice, we create the potential for government to regulate more than just economic behavior. Complicating matters further is the fact that, in many cases, clear public preferences on policy questions simply don't exist. The architecture of bureaucracy has changed considerably in the past half century. The command and control oriented bureaucratic hierarchy, with its emphasis on formal structure, secrecy, routinization, and efficiency, is its narrow sense and is rapidly becoming obsolete. In order to maintain the needed flexibility, creativity, and innovation, new public organizations must be structured around projects or problems to be solved rather than as permanent hierarchies. Overhead bureaucracy refers to increased costs in administering government programs imposed by mandates to include those affected by policymaking decisions. Program efficiency tends to decrease as participation increases. Another major change concerns the efforts of expanded public participation, as well as the demands for new forms of interacting with government, including those accessing e government, social media, and the internet. From what is usually known as the liberal side of the political spectrum has come a call for a greater internal participation in decision making by agency employees, as well as external participation by affected clientele. Another significant change has been further development of information technology and management science techniques that have contributed to more sophisticated and systematic administration. One dimension involves growing use of e government, enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, quantitative methods, and computers, in short, management science applied to operations of government. A quite divisive development is the widespread effort to eliminate or at least weaken public employee unionization and collective bargaining. The growing pressures on government spending at all levels is also a concern, with many serious budgetary constraints such as increasing public debt and extensive reductions in public funding. Debureaucratize is a strategy to decentralize and deregulate the public sector by reductions in force. This promotes greater flexibility in personnel decisions and increasing results oriented incentives to reduce overhead costs. Just as there are paradoxes in the environment surrounding public administration, there are paradoxes in its concepts and its practices. One broad paradox revolves around impacts of participation in administrative decision making by divergent and frequently conflicting groups. These include program clientele, members of public employee unions, and agency personnel seeking to participate in internal management consistent with their own organizational values. All three kinds of participation offer potential opposition to the values of the rationality, professionalism, leadership, and accountability. Participation can conflict with rationality because it's based on political inclusion of new and varied interests. Participation can conflict with professionalism because its advocates seek to have decisions framed in terms of impact on those affected rather than on the basis of what professionals think is best for people. Participation, however, can conflict with traditional forms of leadership by acting as a constraint on leaders' ability to set the direction of the organization or political systems. By increasing participation in decision making, it becomes more difficult to pinpoint just who was responsible for initiating and enforcing a decision, and therefore to hold these people accountable for their action. Americans have a reputation for being pragmatic people with concern for not only what is done, but also how it's done. A second paradox involves contradictory tendencies towards centralization and decentralization, with the latter preferred by many Americans. Many factors in the social and economic environment still illustrate the need for well coordinated, centralized responses to shared problems. Another paradox is the need for better communication among diverse professionals in the face of continued emphasis on electronic government and professional specialization. There's a fundamental paradox in the overall perspectives that exist on strengthening public bureaucracy. The academic study of public administration is subject to the same wide ranging changes in concepts and practices. First, movement away from political science has characterized much of public administration and its academic professionals. Second, some schools of management and business administration have inaugurated distinct public sector management portions of their course offerings. Efforts to develop joint business and public policy degrees based on best practices of both public and private management hold promise for preparing future careerists. Third, schools, programs, and institutions of public administration have proliferated in the past 60 years with a number of distinctive features. They are generally separate from political science departments and tend to be graduate level rather than undergraduate programs, building on a base of good general education. Organizational humanism and organizational development have continued to exert an influence in public administration. Organizational humanism has found some response with public administration, especially in organizations with less structured tasks, permeating greater creativity and innovation. The rise in the study and application of quality and productivity improvement systems, such as total quality management, has similarly had a substantial impact on public administration as a field of study. Furthermore, teaching administrative ethics has assumed a more predominant place in the study of public administration. Government administrators have both the need and the opportunity to make value choices affecting the lives of others in the course of discharging their responsibility. Finally, the very nature of the academic field and the subject matter that it comprises remains an unsettled question. If rapid change, diversity, and uncertainty characterize the discipline now, they will be ever more characteristic of it in years ahead. There are a few things that seem important in the overall scheme of things in public admin. First, we must reinforce the increasing importance on effectively managing public programs. We must pay more attention than we have recently to controlling bureaucratic waste, fraud, and mismanagement. One aspect is the movement towards deregulation, though how fast, how far, and in how many areas of economic and society activity are questions that still need to be answered. There's a precedent for pursuing at least one alternative approach, using government agency performance as a basis for comparison with private sector performance. It's clear that the sentiment has been growing for a wholesale reduction of government regulations of all kinds. Managing public personnel is another area of significant change and continued challenge. As we refine our theories of organization, leadership, and management control, there are limits on how widely such theories can be applied. The political environment of public administration has also changed dramatically. Though acknowledging the importance of citizenship and partisanship to maintain accountability and equity, appointed and elected officials must respect citizen rights to receive full value for their tax dollars. Public managers cannot excuse unacceptable employee behavior, failure to meet service standards, or poor service because some citizens fail to participate as actively as others in partisan aspects of government. Public services can respect customer service standards by accrediting associations, other governments, or the private sector. In a turbulent, intense political atmosphere, many sincere and often impatient citizens might do well to distinguish between the individuals with whom they disagree and the agencies themselves. These attitudes foster public cynicism and distrust, making it difficult for administrative agencies to have the capacity to respond when we do call upon them.